Alright, this video goes along with the recent blog that I had submitted to SPL. It's Strange Ways Here We Come, talking about input lists and mic techniques, stuff like that. So the bottom line with the input list thing was that I've always done it differently than just about everybody else I've ever met. I run into shows and I meet a tech and he's like, why do you do your input list like this? It's just weird. We don't do it like this. No one ever does. No one's ever seen it like this. So I just thought I'd write about it and explain why I do what I do and what I'm doing. So the typical input list is, on drums anyway, kick, snare, hi-hat usually, rack tom, mid-tom, floor tom, overheads maybe. To me, that really never made sense because if you're looking at the drum kit, you're going to start with kick, yeah, obviously, then snare. But if you do it like I do, and pretty much everyone I know does, you go from left to right as you're kind of reading it. So from left to right across the stage, the next thing that would come into play would be either the hi-hat, that's certainly true, but as far as toms go, it would be the lowest floor tom, which to a right-handed drummer is on stage right, and from front of house view, it's to the left. So my input list was always kick, snare, and then floor tom, and then the next highest tom, then the next tom, and then the highest rack tom. So again, it's as you look at it going across the drum kit. And the weird thing comes into play when people, have to cross path and, start messing around with wires and cables, and if you're in a festival situation, things get really screwy. So, in a lot of situations where there's a time crunch, I won't worry about it. Just patch it the way you need to, and I can either soft patch it on the desk or just deal with it the way it is. But when I have time and, we can put the effort into making it the way I'd like to have it, that's how I do it. So the other benefit for me doing it that way with all the shelled drums together is that when I look at my console, which is an Avid profile usually, I can go to my high-pass filter page and just look at all the high-pass filters and see that they're all grouped together. And I do kind of roll up the snare a little bit, but for the most part, all my shell drums have very low high-pass filters, and then the cymbals, which are grouped next, have pretty high ones. So I can very quickly look and just hit that button and see them right there. And it's just a visual thing for me. It makes it a little easier. So again, the input list would be kick, snare, floor tom, the lowest floor tom, then the next one, and up from there. And somebody else also mentioned that makes sense because you play a piano low from left to right up to high. So it made sense that the drums would start from the left low and then go up high as they go towards the right. So that's cool too. As far as cymbals, I usually have the ride and then the hi-hat and then the overheads grouped together. Sometimes I do the overheads and then ride and hi-hat, but again I do the ride because for a right-handed drummer it's going to be stage right, and from front of house it's on the left. If you take a look at the drum kit here, you can see that up there I've got a stereo bar with an XY configuration, I guess you'd call it, for the overheads. And I do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think it's just a lot cleaner of a look to the drum kit than having an overhead over here and an overhead over there. I just like the way that looks visually, and sometimes, if you have a small riser, it might be difficult to even get, another couple of tripods up there. So it just kind of condenses things down, and also for phase, right there in the middle, it's going to pick up everything pretty much evenly, and if the drummer's balancing himself properly, it's going to pick up a nice, even, balanced representation of the drum kit, almost exactly as the drummer hears it, because that's going to be right above his head, so stuff like that. I've got the ride mic from underneath here, and a lot of times I'll use a clamp or a claw on there, but in this case we're using a small tripod. I've been trying to get away from using stands as much as possible, just for the cleanliness of the kit, and also that it's just less stuff that we need to either set up and break down at the end of the night. I'm using pretty standard mics on everything. Kick is getting there's an E901, a Sennheiser in the drum itself. There's a 602 on the outside. Obviously, like many people, blending the two together. Snare has a Heil handy mic on the bottom of it, and then today I'm using a Sennheiser 605 on the top of the snare. Sometimes I use the Heil PR22. There's a whole mixture of things. 604s on the toms, and that leads us to the other thing, is that a lot of times on toms I'll mic the top and the bottom of the drum. Bottom line for that is that you'll get, I've always achieved really huge sounding tom results from using top and bottom. And what I've done is I made Y cables that are 2 into 1, 2 outputs into 1 input, so I don't use twice as many channels on the desk, so that way they're still feeding just one preamp. Obviously one side is going to be polarity reversed, and it's usually the top, but I don't think it really matters in the end. And again, I have to use much less EQ to get that big, nice, thick, boomy sound out of the toms. So one note about mic technique that I've dealt with before is that, I see a lot of guys doing all kinds of weird things with mics, and that's cool. I love experimenting. I love seeing what other people do and trying out new things. But for me, for the most part, I usually find that a pretty straight-on approach works best, and I'll demonstrate that. And so by straight-on approach, I mean kind of like this. So here's the drum head, and there's the mic. And it's just about, there's a little slight angle on it. And I found out with this drummer and this way he plays that sounds best. And, sometimes I'll even go even more right on the drum like that. It'll have to come up a little bit. I usually do it just so my fingers can reach just under the mic, just like that. And I find I get a really good, tight result like that. One of the other reasons for doing that is that you get much better isolation. I'm not picking up sound sources from everywhere else. All right, I'll give you an example of the dual mic technique on the toms. It's basically the same idea as miking the top and bottom of a snare, just with the toms. So here's the top mic, and it's got this cable on it, which is also fed down to the mic on the bottom. Placement's pretty much the same. The cable itself, if you look at it, it's very simple. It's just this thinner cable is just wired into the thicker one, the regular gauge cable. And it's polarity reversed, so the bottom mic and top mic are out of phase with each other, out of polarity with each other, and which you typically need to do when using two mics. And that's about it. Very simple, real straightforward, and it sounds great.
All right, here you'll be able to see and hear the effect of the two microphones on the toms. The first clip has two mics, the second clip has one.